we need to go to $2,000. I didn't say he was a visionary. He's right on this issue.
You know, obviously Speaker Pelosi, Senator Chuck Schumer, the Treasury Secretary debated this with Republican leadership for a long time. They cut a deal with a $600 stimulus check. Did they just waste their time and cut a lousy deal?
Well, look, when you look at a deal, you have to look at it within the context of the problems that we face.
Lindsey Graham told ABC News, "I would vote against it," referring to the government funding, and he said he was urging his Republican colleagues to do the same. It's not yet clear whether Republicans will unite behind Graham's efforts, but most GOP aides familiar with the matter say they do not expect that. Throughout the crisis, the American government has sent out rounds of stimulus payments, first under the former president and now with President Biden. But most stimulus checks were sent as electronic checks to bank accounts. But when the IRS didn't have a recipient's direct deposit information, they mailed paper checks. So like all payment checks sent from the Treasury, if these checks are not cashed within 1 year, they expire. And that's good news. You can request a new one if you have a check that expires. Approximately 9 million people in the US, 9 million US citizens that is, live overseas. Stimulus payments worth $5.5 billion were sent to more than 1/3 of those expats, soldiers, and rural travelers. There is a $1,400 fourth stimulus payment. The IRS has released a new announcement that for all taxpayers that have received the stimulus checks, that have received the stimulus cash. With tax day well behind us, millions of Americans are still waiting for the refunds. Some have already been waiting for several months for the federal income tax refunds to arrive after completing paper returns and mailing them in late January or early February. As of August, the IRS has had around 8 million unprocessed individual tax returns. Of them, 1 million returns contain errors or require special handling, while 6.5 million are paper returns that still must be reviewed and processed. In its latest update, the agency said that this is a mix of returns for 2021 and late file returns for the previous tax years. The IRS says it's essentially been unable to process the 2022 returns until it finishes processing all the 2021 returns. So before the crisis, the IRS typically delivered refunds to paper filers within 4 to 6 weeks. However, over the past year, refund delays tied to paper filings have generally exceeded 6 months. While doing taxes can be stressful, the process can be satisfying once your return hits your account. The good news is that the IRS has to pay interest on any money it owes you, so your tax refund comes from your 2021 return, and the IRS is required to start paying interest on overpayment 45 days after accepting a tax return. To determine the status of your return, you can use the IRS tax refund tracker, which will also let you know if your return has been rejected by the IRS because of errors. If you filed a proper return and you did it on time and the IRS does not issue your refund within 45 days, the agency is required to start paying interest on your refund amount. As of July 1st, the IRS inflation
Senator Van Hollen of Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and great to see you, Mr. Chairman. Great to see an SEC chairman from the great state of Maryland.
It's great to see my senator.
Yeah, right. Let me just pick up on the first point that Senator Kennedy raised in terms of implementation of the Holding Foreign Countries Accountable Act. I just want to thank you and your team for pursuing that. I also agree we should shorten the time period to 2 years, and I want to thank Senator Kennedy for his work on this. The idea, of course, was to make sure we protect American investors, especially smaller investors, by ensuring that all companies listed on our exchanges comply with our accounting rules. And I know you had very tough negotiations with China. Thank you for keeping us informed. The ultimate proof is in the pudding, right? Their execution of it. But I do want to salute you and your team for all your efforts to date on that. I also want to thank you for moving ahead on a rulemaking to crack down on abuses of 10b5-1 trading plans by insiders. At the beginning of this Congress, Senator Fisher and I introduced legislation directing the SEC to undertake such a rulemaking. You did it, and we are monitoring that carefully. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article back in June, which I think, along with other studies, revealed clear abuses by insiders in these areas. And of course, when insiders benefit, it means the investors lose often, because sometimes these are gamed to take the gains before the overall value of a company decreases, stock value. So I want to thank you for that. We're monitoring that. I also want to thank you and your team for recognizing the real issue of fraudulent scams, security scams, often directed against seniors. These amount to up to $3 billion every year. And we have a bipartisan bill here that I know the chairman and the ranking member are probably tired of hearing of, but I appreciate their I think, support for the bill, which is to empower states to better crack down on this fraud by creating a grant, federal grant through the SEC to help them out. And we've heard testimony on behalf of state insurance commissioners and state securities commissioners strongly indicating their support. So you recognize this is a big problem that we should deal with, do you not?
I do. I think that fraud in, as you said, in the elder community, or sometimes it's affinity-based fraud, we see all too much of it at the SEC in our weekly enforcement meetings.
I'm sure you do, and that we want to pass this legislation just to better fortify states to crack down on this kind of fraud. We're working with you on the ticker legislation as well, Senator Scott from Florida and I want to ask you about something you and I have spoken about before, which is country by...
Now, Chuck Schumer has proposed a few changes to President Biden's spending bill. These changes will greatly affect many families and Social Security beneficiaries. Here is the latest and most up-to-date stimulus check, Social Security, and SSI, SSDI information that you have to know. So you want to be sure to stand to the end of the video, folks. So we will see a lot of action be taken by congressional Democrats this week. Lawmakers are going to be very busy with a packed to-do list, which includes potential election reform, government funding, and getting important parts of President Biden's economic agenda signed into law. So the slow movement on getting any bills passed in Congress has definitely prompted some angst among Democrats, specifically the frontliners running for re-election. With Biden's approval ratings drastically decreasing, Democratic lawmakers are scrambling to demonstrate success by delivering on past promises to the American people, like curbing prescription costs. But there remains a big obstacle in the way, and that is Joe Manchin. I know many of you were disappointed when Manchin came out in opposition to the package, but some Democrats are urging the Senate to pass a chunk of the bill before others. A group of lawmakers want to advance the $555 billion portion of the package focused on combating the climate crisis. But this section is different than others because it is a section of the bill that Manchin previously said he could support. A representative of New Jersey said that climate change simply should not be a partisan issue, and it is just something that we must do. Now, Joe Biden has already said he believed the Democratic Party could agree to the climate section of the plan, largely made up of tax credits designed to ease the transition to cleaner energy sources. The good news is that Manchin appears interested in working with Senator Susan Collins of Maine and a group of over a dozen senators on a bipartisan election reform deal. Joe Manchin told Insider, "We can work on everything, but election reform is a thing. We want to make sure we get done quickly." Manchin added that future negotiations on the centerpiece of Biden's agenda will be starting from scratch. Momentum is also building on Congress for more stimulus relief, funding to support low-income Americans, restaurants, and other businesses struggling to stay afloat in the face of the latest wave of the crisis. Now, this is some awesome news, friends. I know many seniors and families could use more relief right now, and lawmakers involved in negotiations say support has been funding aimed at supporting Americans and businesses that have been negatively impacted by the crisis. Democratic Senator Ben Cardin is the chair of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. Cardin expressed optimism when discussing he and Senator Rogers' effort to gain more backing for the push among their colleagues. The senators told The Hill that we are continuing to get bipartisan support. Cardin also said the primary focus in talks has been to replenish relief funding for Americans and restaurants, after a previous batch of funds allocated by Congress ran out months back. Advocates say that funding would come at a crucial time, as restaurants continue to grapple with the economic effects of the ongoing crisis. So I do think Congress should pass another stimulus package that provide all Americans and businesses with more financial assistance. Multiple sources are telling The Hill that the funding cannot happen soon enough, noting thousands of restaurants are closed permanently or long-term as many businesses find a hard time recovering during the crisis. It's really sad to see that many small restaurants are still incredibly vulnerable right now. Last year, lawmakers approved more than $28 billion in relief funds designated for restaurants as part of the Restaurant Revitalization Act. Advocates say that while those funds were effective in helping many restaurants remain operating in the short term, a chunk of restaurants were left behind in the process. Some advocates are also pushing lawmakers to ensure businesses in other industries receive more financial relief during the crisis. So I do agree that the American people should receive additional stimulus aid as this crisis continues. What are your thoughts on this, everybody? Tell me in the comments down below. And do you believe that President Biden is doing all that it takes to send out more stimulus payments?
Jane, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I want to thank Secretary Granholm and Buttigieg and Gina McCarthy for being here today, and Congressman Jim Cooper, an old friend who did an awful lot to get this to go in Tennessee. And Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee, he deserves credit as well. He wasn't able to be here today, but he worked hard to help make this happen. Another example of what America can achieve when we come together, Democrats and Republicans, to get things